two early, very significant military interventions in your time as Prime Minister, Sierra Leone and Kosovo. How crucial were they to your growing sense of yourself as Prime Minister and your power in the world?
Kosovo, very much so. It was the time when the first occasion in which I could actually feel that I was putting my job on the line in a way. But I believed absolutely clearly that to have ethnic cleansing going on the doorstep of Europe and not to act would be disastrous.
After those two interventions, you made what, in retrospect, seems a very significant speech in Chicago in 1999, where you developed a new doctrine about dictatorships.
Yes, my view is that the essential characteristic of today's world is its interdependence. And I don't think a significant problem, ever remains located in one part of the world. It now spreads very, very quickly. And therefore, I also think that there can be circumstances in which it is legitimate to intervene, even in another country's affairs, where the oppression of a people is so cruel and where you can't simply say, well, unless our national interest is directly threatened in a very specific way, we're not going to have anything to do with it. So you can
topple tyrants because they're tyrants, not because they immediately threaten other people?
In very limited circumstances, though. I mean, I don't, I don't think, look, take Mugabe, which is a thing people often say. I mean, is that someone who would be good if he weren't in power anymore? Absolutely. Can you start engaging in military action to topple him? No. So you've got to be extremely careful of this. And out of this, incidentally, came the United Nations change, the so-called responsibility to protect, which is now part of the UN rules.
So then comes 9/11. Did you pretty instantly think the world is now at war in a new way?
Yes. Yes, I was very, very clear that for me this changed everything. And the reason for that was very simple, and it explains all the things that happened from then. The point that impacted on me more than anything else was that here were 3,000 people, totally innocent people, killed in a single day in New York. But if they could have killed 300,000, they would have killed them. And so, in my view, what this did was completely alter the calculus of risk. From then on, you could not take chances on this issue, in my view.
And it put you shoulder to shoulder, it soldered you with an American president many people in this country, above all in your own party, loathed, George W. Bush.
It put me absolutely shoulder to shoulder with the American people, and George Bush was the American president, and we formed a close and strong alliance after that point. And my view, again, was not that we had to do this for America, but we had to do it for Britain.
Iraq becomes part of the equation because it's on the American agenda. To go into Iraq requires legal cover, and it requires, therefore, weapons of mass destruction to be believed to be there. We now go into the hardest bit of all of this, I suppose, which is the suspicion which remains today that you wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein above all because he was a bad man, and that the weapons of mass destruction you knew, there was patchy evidence, you knew they may be there, you thought they might be there, but actually it was an excuse for something else.
Yeah, and let me just state absolutely clearly and unequivocally, the reason for toppling him was his breach of United Nations resolutions over WMD, right? Now, when people say, well, so the regime was irrelevant, of course it's not irrelevant. This distinction, this very binary distinction...
You've said you would have gone after him even if he hadn't had WMD.
No, but what I mean by this is that obviously if you knew now what you knew then what you know now, then of course the WMD case is that he was in breach of the United Nations resolutions, right? He was in breach of those United Nations resolutions.
But he didn't have WMD.
No, but here is the thing that is really, really important. When you then go and look at the Iraq Survey Group report, which is the report that was then done after Saddam was toppled, and which includes, in its final report in 2004, interviews with Saddam, with his leading people, with the scientists and so on. What he'd decided to do was to put his program into abeyance, to get rid of the sanctions, and then reconstitute the program, probably with nuclear capability and certainly with chemical weapons.
But that's a who-knows one-day maybe thing.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
We were told that you know, by you, that there were weapons that could be used within 45 minutes. I vividly remember being shown the maps with the circles and British bases in Cyprus and a great drumbeat towards war that, in retrospect, was wrong.
And I've always apologised for the fact that the intelligence was wrong. What I can't apologise for, however, is the decision we took, which we took, incidentally, based on intelligence at the time. So all I'm saying to you is, you know, this has been gone over many, many times. The intelligence picture was clear. We acted on it. And all I'm saying to you about the Iraq Survey Group report is it isn't correct to say that that report finds, well, maybe he might have at one point. No, what they actually find is that he retained the technical know-how, he retained the scientists able to develop this, that there were laboratories that he concealed from the UN inspectors that were there ready for use. In other words, I don't accept even today that there isn't a strong case that he was in breach of the United Nations resolutions. He was.
And yet, at the time, Hans Blix, the inspector, wanted more time, and I would put it to you that by that stage, we were being driven above all by the military timetable, that the troops were on the ground, they were waiting to go, and in Chicago, in that speech, you said all diplomatic roads have to be gone down before we can do this kind of thing. They hadn't been.
But they had been, because in November 2002, we got a fresh United Nations resolution that had given him a final chance to come into compliance. Did we in the end contemplate that it would be as long and bloody as it was? No. But again, the reason why it was long and bloody was not through toppling Saddam. We did that in 2 months. And by the middle of 2003, incidentally, British forces were there in Iraq with full United Nations authority, right? Yeah. And to stabilize the country, which was then destabilized by the same external forces that we face in Afghanistan today and in other parts of the world.
I want to come on specifically to that in a moment. Just before we do, these last few weeks and days before the war, which caused your reputation so much damage and caused so much anger in the country, one of the other great issues was the legal cover for war. Now, the Foreign Office lawyers were jumping up and down saying we don't have legal cover without another resolution. One of them, Elizabeth Wilmshurst, went. They've spoken at the Chilcot inquiry afterwards. And yet it's only 3 days before the war happens that you go to your Attorney General and ask for a final decision. That's a heck of a lot on the shoulders of one man. He knows that if he gives you, as it were, the wrong answer, that could be the end of your prime ministership, it could be the end of the Labour government, it could be the end of the intervention, it could be the end of the alliance. It's a heck of a thing to ask your Attorney General.
But that's not actually what happened. What happened was over a period of months, there was a huge debate, not just within our government, within different governments, about the legal justification. And incidentally, the legal justification was quite clear. The resolution in November 2002 had said there's a final chance for Saddam to comply, and he must comply immediately.
The Foreign Office lawyers didn't think it was clear.
Yeah, but other lawyers did think it was clear.
You can always find a lawyer to back you up, you know that.
I know, but you can say that about either side. The fact is, there was a disagreement, it was resolved in the end, and the Attorney General's advice is given, and he's given the account on many, many occasions as to why he came to this view. The whole point about it was this. And this is the thing to understand why I did this, because...
But you didn't come to the House of Commons and say, it's finely balanced, but on, I think we have legal justification. You said, we definitely got legal justification, we've got absolutely fine.
We said completely accurately, the Attorney General had said that the war was legally authorised, which it was. But the important thing is to stress why... Look, you know, one of the things people often ask me who are more friendly to me, okay, will say to me, why did you take such a momentous decision which you knew was extremely unpopular in many quarters and so on and so forth? And the answer to that is because I believed strongly then and now you don't take a risk on this issue anymore. And that's the reason why, for example, on Iran today, I'm in exactly the same position. I would never, not on my watch if I had anything to do with it, allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons capability.
Going back to the legal issue, you didn't even tell the Cabinet about the nuances and the problems with the legal problem.
The Attorney General himself came to Cabinet. There was a discussion at Cabinet about it. Look, again, one of the myths, because what happens in a situation like this is that people always want to look for a conspiracy, or they want to look for some, you know, it was about oil, or it was to do with some other American strategy. It was for the reasons that we gave.
Well,
and
you say that.
We had the cabinet involved every part of the way. In the end, it was a decision. Now, if I'd taken the opposite decision, and let's supposing America had then decided not to continue, Saddam would still be in power today, with his two sons. Now, you can have an argument about that. I'm not saying that I have to persuade you. I'm simply saying it is at least arguable, given the hundreds of thousands that died under Saddam, given the wars that he started, given what he did, given the fact that he developed WMD and used them, even against his own people. I mean, thousands dying in a single day in an attack on a Kurdish village. It is at least arguable that the world is better off without him than with him.
The vote in the House of Commons and the report